Good evening, Maine. This is the Muddy Waters podcast, and I am your host, Chuck Ellis. And thank you all for watching the Muddy Water. Jeez, I keep stumbling over that. Eventually, I'll be able to say my own intro. The Muddy Waters podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on here in our state, in part by interviewing people from around the state who have stories to share. Like today, we have with us Courtney Lacasse. Courtney, thank you for joining us. How many podcasts have you done?
This is my first.
All right. Well, welcome to the show. And thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. And so kind of like kick things off, okay, so this is a political podcast. I'm a conservative, right? And like what in the world, and we are in probably one of the most divided times, in U.S. history. Arguably, probably the Civil War was that we were a little bit more divided as a country. But in a time like this, what in the world would possess you to be involved in politics in the year 2025? Like, I guess that'll be my first question. Then we'll get into like kind of your story.
I guess I never really planned on being in politics in 2025. It just kind of dropped in my lap and I took the opportunity. I was a stay-at-home mom and I got a text message actually from my mother-in-law's boyfriend asking me if I would be interested in being a school board director, actually for the MS 8052 district, because we had an open seat that we were having an election for back in, it was April, I think. I think the seat was up for election in April. And I was like, I don't really know, because I've always been told my whole life, like, you either love me or you hate me. There's really no in between. I'm either your best friend or, I rub you the wrong way, I guess. So I was like, I don't know if I would be good in that kind of environment, just because I can be so upfront and blunt with things. But I gave it some thought and I decided after a week that I would text him back and ask him to give my number to the president of the GOP for Androscoggin, and he passed my number along to Alan, who then called me and was like, hey, like, we already have a candidate for this seat. Would you like to be part of PRE? And I was like, well, what's PRE? And he said, it's Parental Rights in Education Maine. And it was a nonpartisan 501c3. And it was about, advocacy and giving parents giving rights back to the parents. The child is, what was I thinking? I'm so sorry. It is 8:00 at night.
No worries. Yeah. So
basically, we believe parents, not the government, are the primary stakeholders in their kids' education.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've been fortunate. We've had Alan on the podcast a couple of times, and I probably need to find some time with him to get him back on, because he is just a wealth of knowledge. Like every time I see him, he has another piece of information that's like, oh my gosh, like, and he just knows so much of his stuff because he's dedicated to this. And so he reached out, and you decided to join PRE. Are you like one of his? What are you doing for PRE outside of, like, we'll get into like what you've been doing recently, but like, are you like in a volunteer coordinator role kind of thing, something like that?
I'm fairly new, so I'm what's called a district affiliate for my area.
Yeah. Nice. And so you said do you say you're a stay-at-home mom?
Yeah, I'm a stay-at-home mom.
And so you're doing this, and how many kids do you have?
I have 6.
6 kids. So on top of raising 6 kids, you're also volunteering and giving your time to try and help your school district.
Yes, and I have been called absolutely insane by just about everyone in my life.
Yeah, well, it definitely is a huge burden to bear. But the truth is, if people don't make sacrifices, we can't make change, right? If everybody just sits back and says, I don't have time for it, we'll hope somebody else steps up, we end up getting, where we are. So thank you for stepping up despite all those challenges Obviously, being raising 6 kids, I have one of my brothers has 4 kids. I was one of 4, and I know that moms in those types of scenarios, it's very easy to just pull your hair out. In general, so with 6, it seems like it's even more chaotic, and so I can't even imagine. But in the midst of that, thank you for stepping up and helping fight for kids. So what I think this will get into your story, but like so that's kind of like how you got connected, but like what motivates you to be involved? Like what's happened in your past that kind of put you in a position where you're like, I don't like what's happening in the schools and I don't want it to keep happening.
So I grew up in Auburn. Um, and then I was kind of getting into like the wrong crowd, and my mom kind of noticed that. So she was like, you know what, we're gonna move. So we ended up moving actually to Turner, which is where I'm still at. And I loved it. Like I have minimal complaints about the school that I went to. Back then it was pretty awesome. Just all the extracurriculars and whatnot. But my freshman year, I was fairly new. It had been I'd only been there a couple months. I would, I want to say it was around October because everyone was still talking about the homecoming float. I was sitting in class, and I had raised my hand and asked to use the restroom. And I grabbed the hall pass and I was excused. And I remember walking in there, and there was a boy. He was in my homeroom class. I'm not gonna name him, but there was a boy in there, and I figured, it was a mistake because sometimes you just walk into the wrong room, and you're like, oh my god, I'm sorry. Just quickly correct yourself.
I
So
I did that recently. There wasn't anybody in there, but I was like, this doesn't look right, and I was like, oh crap, I'm in the wrong, and so I ran back out.
It happens,
It
and
happens.
it's
It
just an
happens. Yeah.
honest mistake sometimes. So I looked at him and I was like, "Oh, hey, I think you're in the wrong restroom. This is the ladies' room." And he looked at me, and I remember vividly, he was like, "No, I have permission." And I was just so taken aback by that, and it's like I was 14. I didn't know what to do in that moment.
Yeah.
And just stunned. So I kind of
And
just
what
went
year
about
was that too? So you were 14, and that was in the
um
year.
that would have been fall of 2010.
Okay, so 2000. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, go ahead.
So 15-ish years ago.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, I went about my thing, and then I went back to class, and I remember asking my teacher like, "Hey, there was a guy in the ladies' bathroom. Um what he said he has permission. What's that situation about?"
Yeah.
And my teacher was just as shocked as I was, and he was like, there shouldn't be a boy in the girls' bathroom, but he's like, I can check into it. He's like, maybe it was just like him telling you that um he had permission and he didn't, in which case he'll get in trouble. And that's kind of where it stayed. Like I would ask about it because he would be in the bathroom about the same time every day.
Hmm.
Um, and we switched. So the school I went to, you have one color day, and then you have another color day. There's 2 color days. And every time I had that second color day and I used the restroom around that time, he would be in there. So I brought it up constantly. And I mean, back then it was so new that I was able to bring it up and ask questions. And then I remember, I think it was like at least a month or two after that, I remember going to the office because I wasn't really getting any answers as to why a boy was being allowed into the ladies' restroom. And the one of the office staff stated that he was a unique case and he had special permission to be in there.
Yeah.
So that back then I was like, I wasn't comfortable with it. I knew him by the end of the 4 years, I knew him fairly well. It doesn't mean I was comfortable. Um, I didn't think he himself was going to hurt me, but there was always that concern in the back of my head. Well, if they're letting him in here, who else are they going to let in here?
Yeah.
And as a mom of 3 daughters, I don't ever want them having to go through that.
Right.
And now it's got, you know, it's not just the bathroom anymore. It's the locker rooms, it's sports fields, excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you kind of alluded to this, but like unlike in one of the biggest, like, even if you buy into this stuff, and I personally do not, but even if you do, you have to recognize the potential for we'll call it unintended consequences, right? And as you kind of said, you weren't concerned specifically with that boy, but there is always the possibility of somebody like doing something inappropriate
Yeah.
intentionally because they want to get close to a girl, right? Like a lot of boys don't know what to do with their hormones and do some things that are inappropriate. Like this happens, and when you give them license, it's dangerous. And but the part, but to kind of go back to what I think I meant to get to, was the fact that you didn't have fear about saying something about it, right?
No. But I
Right.
mean, back then it wasn't as common, so there wasn't the stigma around it. So you could ask questions without fear of being reprimanded or punished.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Whereas today, the girls who are in that situation, what are they going to do? Right.
yeah,
They've been told that this is okay and this is normal, and even if they feel uncomfortable, like, I mean, this is one of the problems with the harassment policy, the anti-harassment, anti-bullying policy, right? Is that it
yeah,
basically creates a scenario in which if you even ask that question, you could get talked to as being somebody who is harassing or whatnot, somebody who's in there and who is clearly biologically a male.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's I just think it's part of what I think is the craziest thing about that is like how long ago that happened, because I think one of the things that we keep hearing when conservatives, for instance, are like, we're worried about this happening in the schools, for instance, they're like, well, that's not happening, and then you find out, no, this type of stuff has been now, it's this had been happening all the way back in
a decade and a half.
yeah, 2010, 15 years ago. And so what like, and if you had asked, I mean, again, you were there, you were one of the students, you weren't talking to the media, you were just trying to understand what was going on, and they still wouldn't even tell you. And if somebody had called up from the media and asked, I guarantee you they would have, they weren't sharing that information publicly. This wasn't something that I think was really realized until like the pandemic, right? A lot of the push and the kind of explosion of this happened during the pandemic. And before that, if you had people going around saying that this is happening in the schools, people would have said you were crazy, right? And so
Yeah,
part of the reason I highlight that is because the issue, which the TikTokers really love me for, of furries in schools, right? Is like I want to highlight this because the reality is they told us this wasn't happening, and now they're telling us this isn't happening. And so the idea that there are actually people who pretend to be animals and think they're animals that are in the school system, and the administration is trying to keep it hush hush and trying to tell people that it's not happening. I met with somebody today for not political reasons, but politics came up, because apparently I can't keep my mouth shut. No. And she shared that she had taken one of her kids to a birthday party, and that there had been a child there that was identified as some sort of animal, and they brought the food on the ground and water on the ground to feed this child who was pretending to be an animal. The child was like somewhere between 8 and 10 years old. So this is it, like, this stuff is happening, and this is kind of the next iteration. But like, this is why I think you kind of made the comment, parental rights and education, focusing on making sure that parents are involved and have a right in this type of situation, and making sure that we have education that's focused on education, not indoctrination, and that we are making women feel safe and comfortable is most important.
Absolutely. Um,
Yeah. So tell me, so like you got involved in parental rights and education, and you didn't run for school board, but there are other things that are coming up. My understanding is MSAD 52 has a big, a big vote coming up having to do with these issues, which is why I think you've gotten involved. And so, can you tell us about like what's going on in terms of like what this vote is and how people can like help support if that makes sense. But yeah, and what you've
uh,
been doing, if you want to share about like what you've been doing with all your time. um,
well, the past 2 weeks of my life have been phone calls all around the district. So our school district is MSD 52. It comprises of Turner, Leeds, and Green. So I've been calling residents of all three towns and letting them know about the school board meeting that's happening this Thursday, June 12th. I'll be there at 6 p.m. right before it starts. It starts at 6:30. Um, and then letting them know what it's in regards to. So the vote, or at least part of the meeting, and we're going to be voting on a Title IX resolution. Basically, going back to the original Title IX, the way it was intended when it was created in 1972.
yeah, which I think right now they would call that the 2020 revision before Biden came in and
Yep.
played some games. Yeah.
Yep. Um, so I'm trying to think. Um, I'm trying to think. We've called about 1,000 residents, roughly. And the goal is to get as many people to that meeting as humanly possible, to try to give them, because, we want parents' opinions in these meetings. Not a lot of people go. And unfortunately, if there's not a lot of people from both sides, it's kind of a one sided issue. The last meeting that occurred the beginning, or no, it was the end of the last month. It was kind of one sided. We had a lot of people from one side, but not from the other. So we're hoping to get as many people there as possible so we can hear from both sides. So that one side's not more intimidated by the other side, and hopefully persuade the vote um, in our direction.
Yeah, and so when you say one side versus the other side, I think generally speaking, the liberals are really good at getting people out. Right. This is one of the things I've
Yeah.
gone to a number of school board meetings. I'm going to try to make it to this one to kind of observe and see what's going on. I'm not planning to speak or anything like that, but be there for some moral support as well. Is that like one of the concerns is that like it's crazy that in some of these like conservative districts, you go and based on the behaviors and the participation in the school board meeting, you might assume that this is a very liberal town or this is a very liberal community. And it isn't necessarily, but the liberals are very motivated to show up, whereas conservatives, we don't show up enough. This is part of the problem. And one of the things that I think is true, so it sounds like even though like these are technically nonpartisan, I don't mind there not being D's and R's next to people's names when people go to vote for school board and city council necessarily. Because anyway, that's just, I don't necessarily mind that. However, like this idea of we're like, oh, this is nonpartisan. Well, the reality is everybody like has a political perspective, right? And people who have liberal political perspectives generally are pro transitioning children, giving vaccines without parental consent, all these things. They just generally are. And they're not in, for some reason they're not in favor of like actually educating children. They're more focused on these other agenda items, right? And the more conservative people tend to be more focused on like being fiscally responsible, and making sure our kids are actually appropriately educated and that we're not encouraging we'll call it mental psychosis, but in the gender sphere and a couple other things. And we're not sexualizing kids and stuff like that. Conservatives don't like that, right? And my understanding is that that there's in this school district we hope and believe that the school board itself is not as liberal as it is conservative. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty even keel
It's pretty
when
even
it
keel.
comes to Democrat versus or D versus R. Um, so it could go either way.
Okay.
Um, but I will say it's from based
But,
from the last meeting. There was a bunch of student activists, and it definitely I know activists tend to be loud
yep.
and they tend to scare people out of talking. But if we don't talk, what do we get? We're
Right.
not going to make any progress in the right direction. And I think that's why I've been so vocal on this matter is just to try to get people to speak out about it. And I think another issue is a lot of the people I've talked to, like I said, I've talked to it was like 1,000 or 1,100 people so far. A lot of them had no idea this was going on in our district. They see this, they've seen it on the news and they know it's an issue within the country, but they didn't think it was happening locally. So when I told them about it and I had sent them some references with material re- uh, regarding the district, they were completely taken aback.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I think that that's just the nature and character of most people, right? Like you hear about things happening, and unless it's happening specifically in your family or whatever, I think a lot of people just assume, oh, that I hear that's happening somewhere else. That would never happen here. That would never happen to me. That would
yeah,
never happen to my family. That would never happen in my school. Well, especially if you know some of the people that are in, some of the teachers and some of the other people, it's interesting. Like, but we do this in so many ways, right? Like I've had a number of Democrats or people who are less conservative, we'll say, or either that or they just have, I call it TDS, right? I don't call it, somebody else called it, but I agree, the TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. And people find out that I'm a Republican, and they're like, oh, I didn't think you were a Republican. Like I would never guess that. And what they're saying is, you don't seem like an asshole. And I'm like, well, like I think their perspective is like, well, if you're a good person, you seem like a really good person. So if you're a good person, how could you be a Republican? That's kind of what they're saying without saying it, right? And so I think that there's some. So when you know somebody and you think that they're a nice person, they have a behavior that's nice, you make assumptions that they probably agree with you. Maybe they have the same worldview as you, something along those lines. I think that a lot of people, they don't want to think bad things as well about people that they know and people that are taking care of their kids and people that are working in the school system. And so they just make assumptions that, okay, they're probably good people. They wouldn't do that because why would they do that? Right. And when we say do that, we're talking about, encouraging transitioning through
yeah,
like hiding things from parents about what their kids were doing in the school district. We're talking about boys competing in women's sports. We're talking about the other harassment things that we're talking about. So these types of things, you just assume that, okay, nobody who's good would be in favor of that. And if they were, they would tell people. Right. And
yeah,
so I think that's a big part of the conversation, is like that's why we don't want to think bad about other people, our friends and neighbors, our kids teachers. And so we also don't want to admit to ourselves that something as, like, I think crazy, we'll say, as that could be happening in your school district. And so it's no surprise to me that a lot of people were like, I didn't think that was happening. Now, within that, like, you called and talked to it. I mean, you probably didn't talk to, I know what making phone calls is like, but um how many people of the people that you talked to, I should say, how many people were in favor of what's going on? If you had to, like, give it like an 8 out of 10 or something along those lines, how many people, because I'm sure you talked to some people that are like, I have no problem with that.
um, I'd say probably 70-30.
70-30. Okay.
Yep, 70 on the side of Title IX 2020 revision, 30 on the side of we should be allowing boys and girls sports.
Wow. Yeah, those numbers still stagger me. Like the number of people that are like, I don't see what's wrong with that, which just shows how many people have been indoctrinated by the transgender cult. Which, again, why they're there. I comment on this a lot on the podcast when this issue comes up, is because they actually believe, or they've been convinced, they've been manipulated into believing that if you don't agree with somebody and what they think their gender is in every way, then you put them at risk of suicide, right? So it's like if you say that you're a girl and I say that you can't compete in women's sports because biologically you're not a girl, that's putting them at risk, is what a lot of these people believe, which is why they can't back down. But it's still crazy to see, because like, that is just, anyway, not in touch with reality, and it's
Yeah.
sad that so many people have been caught up in this insanity.
Well, I mean, it's not funny, but I mean, you did have, I think you had a doctor on your podcast, and
Yep,
he was stating that the risk of suicide actually goes up after transitioning, if I remember correctly.
he did, and the data actually shows that specifically it's most significant actually in boys who transition to be girls, especially if they go all the way. Um, if they actually go to the surgery side, down there, so to speak. And I think it's somewhere around 5 or 6, maybe 7 years, something like that, after transition is when
Yeah.
they're most likely, according to a lot of the available data, to commit suicide. So like the lie of the left is that if you don't agree with this, then you're putting this child at risk of suicide. The data suggests the exact opposite. It suggests if you do encourage them and if they do transition, they're actually at a higher chance of committing suicide. But yeah, that is the narrative that they push, and people believe it, because what's really interesting about this century in which we live is that people are much more interested in stories, and they will believe stories more than they will believe facts, right? So
Yeah.
we'll say this, and we've gathered this. A number of professionals have gathered this data from available data from surveys. They will take a lot of that same data, and they will manipulate it and twist it and try to make it, present it in such a way that suggests that people who have transitioned are happy with their transition, even though like there are higher numbers of people committing suicide. Like a lot of the poor surveys that do exist from people after they've gone through this suggest that they still think that making the transition is the right thing, and this is what they'll end up citing on the other side. They're like, well, most people are glad that they transitioned. Although the Dr. Razan seemed to suggest some stuff that I hadn't seen that contradicts that. But anyway, that's what they'll kind of point to, rather than looking at like these data points. And so again, because people are mostly, as long as there's somebody saying something from a data perspective that agrees with the story that I want to believe, I'm going to continue to believe that story regardless of whether or not it actually aligns with the facts. That's just for free. But anyway, yeah, so a lot of people buy into that, but the vast majority of people are not in favor of it. But when you were at that last school board meeting, you kind of mentioned, right, like it felt like there were more people on the other side of the aisle, even though there are actually more people who are on our side in reality. At school board meetings, we don't have the support that the other side has.
Yeah. Um, it was very one-sided, but like I said, I mean, a lot of parents, we have busy lives. We have
Yeah.
kids that we have to, work around, and sometimes we just can't get out to the meeting, and that's life. That is what it is. But I will say we do need to try to be better about that, because if we don't have our input, we're just letting whatever, what I mean, whatever pass that gets brought up from the people that do show up, and most of the time it is students. Um like the last time with their teacher. She had rallied, I believe, I think it was like 10 or 20 students to sit there and to discuss, why we should be allowing, you know, transgender females, excuse me, into girl sports. And it was based around, inclusion. There was some name calling. One student said that we were all or people were obsessed with genitalia, which isn't true. It's far from the truth. I don't care
Yeah.
personally what you got going on. But it's about, biological reality and getting
Yeah.
back to basic biology and science.
Yeah, I mean, and just reality in general. This, I mean, this issue comes up frequently on the podcast because we have a lot of guests that are crossover into this space for one reason or another. And it's just so hard to understand like this, like the push here. Like there's so much of it that's just so hard to understand. And I think, I think it's because it doesn't make sense. It's because we know the truth and we're trying to find a way to understand something that doesn't make sense. And I sometimes tell people, like, stop trying to understand crazy. It's going to make you crazy, right? Like there's an element of this that we know for a fact that boys are boys and girls are girls, and that biological boys should not be competing with girls. That it's not fair. We know that there's dangers associated with, even if you agree with the transgender cult that transgenderism is real, there are dangers in opening up the door and not having any standards for how we would in what case, in what scenario we would allow somebody who quote unquote identifies as the other gender to be able to utilize the bathroom in sports. Of like, they're right now, it's just a free-for-all. You just say I identify as, and you get access to whatever you want. And like, even if you agree with that ideology, that's not a good idea. Again, there are always going to be unintended consequences, and if you don't agree with that ideology, then we're actually encouraging people in a direction that's the opposite of true. We're like, what I keep going back to, and I'm probably a bit obnoxious to some people in this way, is like 2 + 2 does not equal 5. 2 + 2 = 4. Right. And like, when we're trying to tell people that there are not two genders, that there are actually all these other different ones. You can be non-binary, you can be a different gender than your physical sex, and you can actually become a different sex. You can go become the sex of who you believe yourself to be. The reality is, like, that's actually not possible. You can do surgery and you can cut stuff off and you can put other stuff back on, but it's not the same, number one. And number two, your biology never changes. You're still either XX or XY, or some, you either have a Y or you don't have a Y in your chromosomes. Like, you might have multiple X's in some cases, but you either have a Y or you don't have a Y. If you have a Y, you're a boy. If you don't have a Y, if you just have X's, you're a girl. And that is something that cannot be changed. And so we're encouraging kids in a direction that is not healthy for their mental health. And when this is happening, that's one of the things that I think is so pervasive, and not pervasive, it is pervasive, but so dangerous about this ideology, is that, like, this is introducing insanity, like, into our kids. Like, we're teaching them something that is so obviously not true that we can't even explain it in a way that makes any sense, right? Like it, because it doesn't make sense, but we're telling them that they need to. We aren't, for the record, but the education system and a lot of these people are trying to push on them this false reality. And is it a wonder that our kids are struggling and are more challenged than ever, right? Like, I sometimes comment that I be going again soon, but I go to visit my wife. She lives in Kenya until we can get her here legally. Which hand? Right there. This is her. And so anyway, till we can get her here legally, but she, well, my brain will work. Oh, not her. It has nothing to do with her. It has more has to do with going to Kenya. So I went to Kenya I was there for about 5 years, 5 months. Wow, 5 years. If I can get my words out, 5 months last year. And it was so refreshing to be there, because nobody is dealing with this there. Right? You have a conversation with someone and you're like, yeah, this is what's going on in America. And they're like, but that's what everybody's saying there. They're all like, yeah, you guys are crazy. Like, what in the world is happening in America is what they're saying. Right. And so that is so refreshing, because, like, when you're being in America and trying to speak truth on this issue, in my opinion, feels a bit like trying to teach math in an insane asylum. So anyway, there's my little monologue. but I kind of go off on this sometimes because it's so hard to understand. Like, yeah, this is such a dangerous thing on top of all the other issues with our education system. But yeah, anyway. So you
Oh
have
no.
been. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so you've been working hard, calling, and we're trying to get a lot of people there to be able to support the board and help the board make the right decision. Because like this is kind of the point that you were getting at earlier. Is it like, when you've got like a board that's not, what's interesting, what I find to be interesting is like when you have conservatives in power, they need a little nudge. They need some support. They need people to show up to support them, to make them feel like it's okay for them to do what they know they need to do. When liberals are in control, they're going to do what they're going to do no matter how many people show up. We could flood like we did with LD 1619 in the state house. We had so many people speak. It took hours and hours and hours for everybody to give their thing, and they still did what they were going to do, because right now this is just the political landscape. I'm sure in different places of the world, maybe in the past, the Republicans maybe were this way. I don't know. But at the current political landscape, when Republicans or conservatives are in charge, it seems like they still need a little bit of help, in encouragement to do the right thing. Whereas when liberals are there, it doesn't matter how many people from the conservative side show up. They just want to shut you down and kick you out, like they did to some people in Gardner recently.
Yeah.
And so this is why it's so important to show up, especially when you do have your conservatives, so that you can give them support and help them make the right decision and push things in the right way. The liberals are gonna show up, and we need to show up. The kind of, especially Maine conservatives, we just want to be left alone, right? We just want to
Yeah.
do our own thing, live our life, leave us alone, don't bother us. But here's the problem: if we don't engage, then they won't leave us alone, right? They're forcing us to be engaged, or we have to have them continue to invade our lives and do things with our kids that we don't want them to do. And so that's why we need to show up, right? I think that's my
Yeah,
version of
exactly.
what you've been saying as you've been calling everybody around town.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I'm conservative. And I want quiet. I want to be able to raise my kids the way, my husband and I choose to raise them, and I don't want the school interfering in that. And some people will call me names or say I'm a horrible human being, but that's a right that we have. I didn't have children for, the state or the school to raise and mold in the form that they see fit. I had kids to, raise as a family with my husband, based on our morals, our worldviews, and create, a safe family unit. And when you have people that are coming, that are supposed to be safe people, like teachers, like counselors, like neighbors, that are um, giving opposing messages, it makes it harder.
Well, it makes it harder. It's like not just giving opposing messages. It's like intentionally undermining
Yeah.
what you're trying to do, how you're trying to raise your kids. They're trying to let them know that they're wrong, and that again, they're literally trying to undermine the what you want to do with your kids, especially in the education system, especially with the way in which, I have a good friend who is a teacher, and I talked to him a number of years ago, and he basically was saying, and this is, we know this to be a fact now, but it was kind of news to me, that like it's kind of like essentially state law at this point, that teachers are not allowed to tell parents whether, if their kid transitions in school. And again, I think school boards actually have more power here, and they can make a change as far as that goes. The school boards have incredible power to be able to impact the education system at the school district, as Alan Servinas of Parental Rights and Education, as well as Heidi Sampson of Maine Education Initiative, both of them would tell you. And yeah, The government should not be getting into these values in kids and trying to push things that parents don't want for their kids. What's really interesting about it is one of their big things, and you mentioned this earlier, is this word inclusion, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we want to be inclusive of everybody except for the people that don't agree with our views.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
It's
They're
crazy.
pushing inclusion. Well, not for you. Well, no. We don't want to include you and your values. You have to convert to us and our values in order to be here.
Oh yeah. It's I can't understand. I can't wrap my head around the logic. It's not even logic. I don't know what
Yeah.
to
Well,
call
that's the problem.
insanity.
Again, it's trying to understand insanity. It will drive you crazy. And perhaps that's what they want, or the people that are kind of behind the scenes, because this is more. We're gonna hopefully have a speaker come from abroad, actually, later this year if things work out. I call them the global elites. She calls them the global parasites. But there are globalists who have an agenda, and part of that agenda is like undermining parental rights, and really it's a playbook that was laid out by Aldous Huxley. I don't know that if Aldous Huxley intended to have it be a playbook, but it essentially is a playbook. Aldous Huxley was a writer and philosopher, I think, in Britain in the mid 1900s. He passed away, I think, in 1964, if I'm not mistaken, on the same day as my favorite author, C.S. Lewis. But he wrote this book, Aldous Huxley did, called Brave New World, and that's kind of what we're playing out in our world today. And it's basically a system of government similar to 1984, but a little different. Instead of just 1984 style oligarchy, where the government, forces people through fear. In Brave New World, they kind of use fear, but they also use pleasure. And one of the things that they do is they sexualize children. And they try to break down the family unit, which is what all of this stuff is doing. It's driving a wedge between parents and their children, because you're coming in and trying to place this seed of doubt in that we shouldn't trust your parents. If you are feeling this, you shouldn't talk to them. Like, really? The people that sacrifice for you and live for you, and they do everything they can to raise you. And those are the people that you think we should hide information from, the people that really love you the most. But anyway, again, trying to understand what in the world they're thinking, the local people, because again, I think this is more motivated by the globalists and other things than by local people. I think a lot of people just get caught up in the ideology. I mean, I commented, I had a Garrett Mason on last night, and I commented that I really feel like for a lot of people on the Democrat side, this is a religion. And you can make an argument that there are some people on the right that are religiously Republican. They think, sometimes I've asked them, oh, are you a Christian? And they're like, I'm a Republican, aren't I? I'm like, I don't really think that's the same thing. I think it's more complex than that. But okay. But like for some people, yeah, their religion is, even Trumpism and stuff like that. But on the left, like this ideology, it's hard to understand how people believe this, except that this is essentially their religion. And they're caught up in this belief system, and to throw out any of it is to throw out all of it. It's sad that so many people are caught up in this. Is the ultimate reality, because not all of them, there's no way the vast majority of them benefit from this ideology in the long run. So I think a lot of them really do believe. I think some of the politicians know what they're doing, but I think a lot of them actually believe in this. I don't know. I just want to call it insanity. So.
Yeah, I mean, from those I've talked to that are left leaning, the ones that were actually willing to speak with me longer than 5 minutes, and actually have a conversation, they truly believe that, sorry, buddy. they they truly believe that by not allowing transgender females in boys sports, that we're not allowing them to participate in a category that they belong in. And like I said, they're transgender female, but they're biologically male. And I was like, look at all you know, look at the physiological differences between a male and a female. And I'm like, do you honestly think that's fair? And they said, well, and this is, I don't know the statistics on this as well as I'd like to. But the main comment I got was, well, when they're on the hormones, their physiology changes to that of, a female. And my argument for that was, if they've gone through puberty, it doesn't really do what you think it's doing.
Yeah. Well, I think that number one, there's that, but number two, it doesn't level the playing field, which is
No.
why you have boys that are playing in these women's sports that are taking, whatever hormones, and they're still destroying girls, right?
Yeah,
And that's where, like,
biologically, men are faster, they're stronger, they're more agile, they're more durable. That just is how it is.
yeah,
That's biological reality of
yeah,
the sexes.
yeah.
Females and males both have their strengths, but we're different. You can't compare one to the other. It's like comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Alan Bean, who was on last week, did a really great job, addressing this. So if anybody watching is interested, he kind of gets into a lot of this stuff from he's a doctor. I made a joke. I think, I don't know if I said this on the podcast. I probably did, but I also said it afterwards to him. I'm like, it's just wild that we need, like, it's significant that a doctor is saying that boys are boys and girls are girls, but more to the point that, like, it's newsworthy to do a podcast about it. Like, it's just like, where do we go wrong in our society that we somehow got here? But yeah, I think the other element to your point of, I think, why these people are having fall into this process is because they've bought into a bit of Marxist ideology, right? That they probably do recognize the unfairness of what's happening to girls. I think some of them choose to believe that, oh, when they're on the medication, they're just the same as any other girl. It's just like number one, scientifically, it's just not true. We actually know that that's not true. I don't have the data in front of me, but feel free to
Yeah.
research it. It's there. Okay. And we can get Alan Bean to get us some some more data. And there's plenty of people out there that have the data to prove this, right? So, like, we know that even with that, they still have an unfair advantage. Alan was actually suggesting that, is like, by the time they've reached like 6 months, like, boys, I can't remember the exact age, but like very early ages, even before they go through puberty, there are biological differences that boys have, and that those hormone blockers and things like that do not negate. That make it unfair to compete. But the reason that so many people, again, are bought into this is like, from that perspective you're mentioning, is the Marxist ideology, and the ideology that, yeah, even though that's unfair for the girls, geez, what these transgender girls have to go through is just so much worse. That, like, if we have to have all these girls, thousands of girls, feel uncomfortable to be able to for these, because, like, I think they see it's the whole Marxist ideology is oppressed versus oppressor, right? So in this idea of, like, whoever is the most disadvantaged, we have to help and lift them up, which means it doesn't matter who we harm in the process, because, well, those girls, they're not going through anything nearly as bad as what this girl is going through. And so we've got to, even though it's like going to be tons of people who are negatively impacted by this, the person who's being helped is the one who is the most oppressed, essentially. And I think that's also a part of, their quote unquote logic. Yeah. So, but anyway, it's so hard to understand. So, when can people show up? How can they help?
So Alan and I will be there, as well as a few other people, at 6. So if you'd like to speak, if you'd like to get used to the area, I'm not sure which room we're going to be in yet. The safest thing I can say is there's going to be signs depending on the crowd. I'm assuming it'll be moved to a larger room. But we'll be there at 6 with pamphlets where the meeting will be at Turner Primary School. Sorry.
That's right. Turner Primary School at
Turner
6
Primary School at 6 on Thursday, June 12th.
Okay.
So if you'd like to come see us, talk to us, we're going to have some pamphlets, we're going to have some papers, we're going to get you used to the setup of the room so it doesn't look too intimidating. Because I know sometimes the podium and the microphone with the bench can be a bit of a
It's
um,
intimidating. I went
it's an
and spoke.
adjustment.
I went and spoke in Augusta, and that was an experience for me. So, yeah,
But yeah, well,
it's frightening to get up there, but it's not that big a deal once you actually get up there, as long as you come prepared with what you're going to say. But yeah, but like to your point, if people want to get there and kind of get comfortable with so it starts at 6, or you want people to show up at 6.
we want people to show up at 6. It
Okay.
starts at 6:30.
Okay. So if you want to kind of meet some people, talk through, get coached up, even if you're just coming to support like I am, I'm not going to be speaking, but I'm going to show up to support our girls and protecting their sports and spaces because it's not okay. It's not right. So.
No. So we will start our rally for our girls, like I said, at 6, and we hope to see as many people as possible there.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing. And I think sometimes, people underestimate what they can do. And like, I just think it's like incredible that you've called over 1,000 people in your district and you're willing to put yourself on the line. We need more people who are willing to sacrifice and do more than click buttons and click like and share. I do, by the way, I do want one of the things I do advise you to do is like, share, subscribe, do all these things. Also, feel free to support the podcast by checking out our merchandise. Go to muddywaters.us. And you can check out the merchandise that we sell. Cool, fun hats like this one and some other nice things. We've got some mugs. Really nice travel mugs, actually, following the Muddy Waters brand. Encourage you to check it out and support the podcast so that we can continue to bring you content like this and share stories about things that are happening in Maine and how you can get involved. It's a small price to pay to help, advance the fight for freedom here in Maine. And don't worry, I'm not making any money. If I showed you my current income and expenses related to this podcast, you would be aghast. So it would be great to not lose as much money on this. I'm happy to do it, but I also need to survive. So just for fun, throw that out there. I do every time. And again, I'm not asking you to give me money. I'm asking you to buy something. So anyway, and I make a little bit of profit on that. But anyway, so check it out. But also get involved in some way. If you recognize that it doesn't take a lot, you just have to have a little bit of courage, and we need more people to get involved, step up, do the small things of just showing up to school board meetings. That's all we're asking for. Show up, get involved, care. This is how we take back our state. This is how we take back our nation. If we don't do this, we're going to lose our country. I mean, this is like, I don't want to, I'm not trying to be alarmist. And I know there's a lot of fear mongering by politicians and people trying to get people to do things. And fear is one of the big motivators. But the reality is we are dangerously close to our society going in a very dark direction. It largely has gone very dark to the point where there are a lot of people that don't know if there's any hope for America. This is the fact, right? But there isn't hope if we don't do anything. If we sit back and we do nothing and hope it's going to change, we're not going to see change. I believe that there is hope if we get involved, because one of the things I remember seeing at a school board meeting was what happened multiple school board meetings where you have a bunch of these people with this like woke ideology speak, and you just feel like there's no hope. And then one person comes in and speaks truth into that room, and it's like boom, the whole mood of the entire meeting has been shifted. One voice, one person speaking up against a tidal wave of others has an impact. We need more people to do that. So thank you again, Courtney. Thank you for being willing to come on this podcast and broadcast yourself to the internet in order to help advance truth and freedom and parental rights here in the state of Maine. So
yeah, thank you for having me on. And I guess my last comment is, if you really want to help our girls this Thursday, the best thing you can do is show up and speak. That's really all you can do.
All right. Thank you. And we'll see you guys all back here tomorrow. We have another school board person coming to show to join the podcast. Michelle Tucker, school board rep, and Gardner is going to be on, and we're going to talk about some of the fun stuff that's happening in that school board. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you again.
Bye.